Brought to you by Knights of Awakening. This is the Labyrinth. First of all, before we start, I'll give you the title of our show. It's the nature of eclectic mysticism today, and I think if you have any bend towards the mystical, you're going to love this. Be you pagan, be you Christian, be you traditionalist, or be you eclectic, I think this show is going to have a little bit of something for everyone. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to thank everyone for just being here and for keeping up with the videos and keeping up with Knights of Awakening. I want to thank you for visiting, this video and seeing it wherever you come from. If you visit the Rosequartz Labyrinth, I want to thank you for your support there. Just in general, a big thank you to everyone who's joining us because you make this worth doing. Your feedback, your input, all of that makes it fun for us and makes it worth getting up and doing these videos every couple of days, or sometimes a couple of videos a week, or one every day, when our schedules permit. Now, I'm back in the swing of things. I've recharged, I've meditated, I've gotten through shaman sickness, and I am back in action. And with that, I want to hit on a really awesome topic as it concerns mysticism, and that's the nature of being an eclectic mystic. Now, eclecticism and mysticism, or being eclectic in mysticism, really is picking up a lot of things from a lot of other places. And truth be told, we all do this to a greater degree. I didn't say to a lesser degree, to a greater degree. And the reason I can tell you we do this to a greater degree is because most of our traditions are founded on pulling things from other areas. Almost everything we do goes back to Golden Dawn, and everything they did went back to several other mystical organizations, and frankly, you have basically two lines of mysticism that follow at that point, which, this is for modern mysticism, mind you. I'm going to get into other traditional methods in a bit, but you have two groups that kind of branch off. You have shamanic practices that are tribal-based, and then you have high magic practices, which are based around the concepts of drawing the circles, doing the chants, having the symbols, calling on beings, all of those things. Then you have some other offshoot traditions like Shinto, Hindu. You have some Indian methods that exist, and by Indian I mean India. You have some Native American methods that are more into the shamanic area. You have some Qigong-style magics that exist out there that are very hard to find any information on, and it's very incomplete if you're in the Western world. And you have bits and pieces of other sympathetic magic systems that kind of don't exist. And what I mean by that is, they're just, we know the Helm of All provides power and victory in battle and irresistibility in battle, and we don't know why or how or what you're supposed to do. We've seen bits and pieces on how it's supposed to be put together, and then we have entire systems that get built around that are pulling from other things that are very similar to rebuild this system based on outlying cultures. And that's why I say we all do a bit of eclectic work within our magic, even the most traditionalist systems. Chaos magic is the big pusher on this, because chaos magic ideals really broke down how magic does what it does, because in it took a more psychological approach, and it started mixing systems, and then it encouraged the mixing of systems, and then it encouraged, in some circles, the profaning of ideals to build power by creating a dissonance within the mind. That depends on the chaos magic circle you're in and whether or not you agree with it. And I'm not going to get into the right or wrong of that. I am going to say that it broke a lot of our taboos as it concerned mysticism in the early days. And now, as a result of practicing mystic, almost invariably does some form of chaos magic, whether or not they want to admit it. You don't have to admit it. I'm not going to admit it. Well, maybe I will. Yeah, I'm going to admit it. But you don't have to. And that's the important part here. You don't have to admit to doing this. With that also, chaos magic borrowed from all of these cultures. And one of the things that a very good friend of mine brought up that I should mention on this is cultural appropriation, and the difference between that and being an eclectic mystic. And that's a really good one to bring up, because cultural appropriation has become a big thing. And cultural appropriation is costuming, okay? It's when you steal someone else's culture to look like it because you very much think that it's cool, or it's in, or it's neat, or it's awesome. And that is not borrowing a tool from a system. Okay? Mystical tools and mystical methods have been passed down between systems since the dawn of time. Every mystic was one in the old days who would seek out other methods. So much so that even Christian mysticism borrows heavily from several different pagan traditions. What can I tell you? That's not cultural appropriation when you're borrowing tools or methods, okay? Smudging with a sage bundle is not cultural appropriation. Smudging with a sage bundle while you're dressed up in animal hide and dancing because you think it makes you Native American and you're as white as I am and they don't get any whiter than me. That is starting to border on cultural appropriation if you have not immersed yourself in the culture. And what I mean by that is, if this isn't something you plan on dedicating your life to, then it's cultural appropriation. If this is something you're doing because you think it looks cool or it's in and you're like, oh, it's neat because Native Americans are native and I'm wearing furs, then, well, I'm trying to use a little less strong language. I've been told my videos got a little bit harsh in their language recently. I don't know what anyone's fucking talking about there, but I am going to try to control that a little bit more, not a whole lot, as you notice. So, I don't know what to call you at that point if you're dancing around like that and you're making a mockery of the entire culture. You're not just borrowing the tool or the method, but you're doing a very good costume act. Now, if you're part of a culture, if you've immersed yourself in it, in my view, that's not cultural appropriation. You know, we get into this a lot for the Norse cultures and the Asatru, and there is a dividing line, okay, that splits this community in half. And I am on the side that says being Norse is what's in your heart. And there are a lot of people that are like, well, if you're not white and red-bearded, which I am if you've noticed, you don't get to make a decision or be part of the Norse community because we're a bunch of white supremacist assholes. And you're just culturally appropriating our heritage. Thump the chest real hard. I think people like that are idiots. By the same token, I use sage and light it to smudge, and if you tell me I'm culturally appropriating, I'll call you an idiot too. So, you know, eclectic mysticism. I've got 3 pluses and 3 minuses on this, and I'm going to hit the pluses first, and the minuses, and I'm going to give you some thoughts. And this, I hope, will help you in your goal to become a better mystic. Okay, the pluses to being an eclectic mystic. This is pulling from lots of different systems and lots of different methods, which a lot of us do. And I'm not going to say it's good or bad. I'm going to give you some pluses and minuses. So, your pluses. Being able to find what works. Wow, this is the biggest one, okay? Not everything from every system works for everyone. There are people who can do Enochian calls through basic chaos magic systems with a mantra, who do them better than if they did a full Enochian ritual, and they get more out of it. And I don't mean that they feel better. I mean they get results. Like, they sit down there and they can do an Enochian high magic call, 108 bead mala. They have ripped 2 pieces, okay, from 2 other systems and smashed them together, and it works. In fact, I wear a Norse mala, as I call it. That's 81 beads. 9 times 9, 9 realms. Okay, 9 realms into 9 realms is the way I see it. So that each realm exists within all the other 9 realms. And that represents any chant work I do for impacting the 9 within 9. And that is pulling from some Tibetan methods. That's pulling from some Buddhist methods, I believe. It's pulling from some very Eastern magic with very Western ideas. It's not the traditional 108 or 109 bead. It's very different. And that's a good example because it works for me really well. And I use it, and it lends a bit of the Norse, you know, the Norse power to everything I do with it. And as I use the tool more and more, it becomes more and more powerful. So being able to find what works is really useful in this because you get to pick through and find what helps you manifest the best. And it works better with resonance, it works better with your psychology, and how that influences how your mind affects the energy out there. As I've said many dozen thousand times on the Labyrinth, the difference between mysticism and psychic energy work is non-existent. It doesn't exist, the difference. The only difference is that when you aim at it from a mystical standpoint, there's so much more material to pull from. And therefore, you have different systems and ways of working with it that aren't just sitting there and focusing the mind into a great degree of intensity. That's great if you can do it. That's how I do a lot of what I do. That's what makes me, me. But not everyone can. And as I've grown to be more of a teacher over the years, I always look for what I can do to help students grow more. Individuality is what's next. Being able to find what works is great, but also it allows you to build an individual system. And in this, it makes what you do unique from what everyone else does. If everybody is doing Enochian high magic, and you do Enochian high magic, then it will never be your Enochian high magic. And that eclecticism allows you to pull one little thing from somewhere else and insert it within that system. And suddenly not only does it work better for you, but it's yours. And having something that is yours in mysticism means something. It really gives it a lot more oomph and a lot more power. The last one of these is advancement and invention along new lines as a result. This one it's so big and yet so small. By pulling different aspects, different things from systems, from cultures, from ideals, from ideas, you create something new, oftentimes taking a process in a direction that you would not normally have taken it. Oftentimes taking a process to a place that you could not have taken it before based on its own evolutionary methods. To give an example, let's say you do ceremonial high magic under the Golden Dawn method, and you do the banishing pentagram. And instead, you have developed a form of mantra-based banishing or cleansing of an area using water and mantra spread around. You may take that at the beginning of your Golden Dawn-based ritual, and that changes the way you cleanse the area, but then it changes the way you look at the rest of the ritual, and you may still wind up evoking in this case, not invoking, the archangels in this, and you may still affect the corners in the same way, maybe even affect the elements in the same way, but suddenly, as you're pulling these things together, this is something new. It's not a lesser banishing pentagram ritual, and yet it's not a traditional mantra for cleansing either, is it? Suddenly you're holding multiple spheres of energy and understanding in one spot, and it's something more than it was, and it leads you to this inspiration, and maybe this inspiration is a new way to use one of your favored crystals, or maybe to use a wand or a staff or a sword in the cleansing in a way that you would not normally have done. And all of a sudden, this method, while you can see the hints of this and that in it, it's totally new. And that total newness in it, it makes something amazing. So this is the invention. This is how new magic comes into being. And without it, stagnation will set in. And stagnation is terrible. So that's your pluses. Really good pluses, too. Charles, you must love eclectic mysticism. No. Yeah. But not that much. Let me tell you some of the issues with it, the minuses. Okay, and these are at least as important as the pluses. Wandering syndrome. This is where you pick up too many ways to do things, and none of them feel right. You can evoke through this method and that method, and you can invoke through this method and that method. You use your Enochian, you use your Golden Dawn, you're using Wicca, you're using, Tibetan shamanism, you're using Native American shamanism, you're using goetic methods. All of that, and you go to evoke something, and you're like, man, I'm gonna evoke this demon I learned the name of. And I'm gonna use, that's gonna be a trick. I'm gonna use a system, that's for sure. I'm gonna use any system I can get my hands on. You're sitting there, and it may take more time to figure out how you want to do something because you've got so much sitting on your plate. than it does to actually get it done. Moreover, it might not ever feel right because you don't have any grounding or foundation. You don't have anything that has become yours because you've absorbed everything else. And this is where the eclecticism becomes too much. It winds up burdening you. And that falls into the next is the lack of a singular focus and method. You may have divided all of your methods and attentions across mantra and ritual and energy work and everything else in such a way that you are no longer very powerful, very efficient, very capable in any one singular way. And in that loss of singular focus can hamper you and it can burden you. Moreover, you may have pulled so many methods in one area or another that you lack the support methods, that you lack the cores of what made these things work. You know, you go through an Enochian ritual or a Golden Dawn ritual, and they tend to follow a pattern that has certain steps in it that provide certain benefits. The Lesser Banishing Pentagram ritual at the beginning is a major part of that. And as you are hacking this system apart and putting it back together, you might miss something in missing some aspect of that. Maybe you're banishing by sending out and you're not putting something else there in its place. Maybe your evocation doesn't have the safeguards in it, and maybe you do or don't need them, but something is lacking, and therefore the presence of it gets removed. You lose something in the eclecticism, and in it, that loss, if you're not making up for it, it can be devastating to your work. Now that said, my thoughts on all of this. I prefer a little bit of eclecticism, or even a lot of eclecticism, over none. But I got some recommendations that are going to surprise you because, I guess it's obvious that I think the pluses outweigh the minuses. But the minuses really need to be taken into account. That's where my recommendations come in. I highly recommend a middle ground approach in this. You should have some things that are core to what you do. You should have some things that you rely on heavily, that are part of what you do, who you are, whether they're pulled from multiple systems or not, and you need to make those part of what is what you do. For me, raw energy work, okay? Qigong and shamanic journey are the two cores of what I do no matter what. Every ritual I do has some degree of a small shamanic journey in it, even when I do prayer work. I project a small part of myself to the realm of whatever gods I'm working with. Be that an internal or external realm. I'm not going to argue that here. That's for another show. But I project in that way so that I can gain a better understanding, a better connection, a better gestalt from that working. And that's a middle ground approach. I have those three things. And that does a lot for me. I have a few symbols that I will always use given any number of situations, or recommend to people given certain situations. I have thrown the helm of all around so much to so many people, okay, that I now get a small reimbursement from the helm itself. Not literally, but you would think I should. You'd think the original person who invented this symbol would be like, Charles, I want to, I'm dead by 5,000 years now, and no longer within the living. But I want you to get a kickback on this because you spread my symbol around more than any other. But seriously, I rely heavily on the Helm of All. I'm relying more and more on the Vegvizir and the Vegvizir hexagram. That is a revision of that method based on my own methods that I find to be incredibly powerful. I create these core methods, and I make use of them, and I believe that is valuable to you as a mystic. So I'm telling you, you want to find that middle ground. You also want to find out how mysticism does what it does. If you do not know why magic works the way it does, everything I'm saying means nothing. And that's a shame. But you've got to understand that it is a psychological gestalt to an energetic understanding that is beyond the parts of the whole. It makes something bigger than just the parts put together. you understand that, and you start to understand the why of what it does, and start to understand on an instinctive level the currents and movements of magic, and knowing how the mysticism does what it does allows you to pick the parts you need from systems that fit you best. You also need to understand how it does what it does within you. Because if you don't understand what it's doing within you, you're not going to understand what it's doing anywhere. Finding what works for you, but keeping some core methods sacred. I kind of covered that in the exploration of this. You need to keep some core methods. You must keep some methods that are your fallbacks, your go-tos. I highly recommend Qigong or Tai Chi or other energy work methods, be it psychic energy work, Qi energy work, or whatever. Basically focusing energy, focusing intent and will. Why? Because I can rip the hammer from you. I can take away your beads, and your sacred necklace is passed down to you from ancient masters or older masters. Actually, he's not that ancient. He's a little younger than me, but still. The guy who gave me that necklace. But revered masters, there we go. And I can rip those off of you. And in a mystical situation where you're dealing with something you're not ready to deal with, those can be ripped from you. Their power can be drained. But raw energy and an understanding of the flow of the universe can never be taken from you. So I highly recommend that. But for some people, it's the symbolization. For some people, it is that ability to turn a symbol into a thing. And they can do that so well. And actually, we have a member in the Order of the Thorn, one of the groups I belong to, who is a master sigillist, and he would be one of those people. If he has a pencil and paper, he's a force to be reckoned with. And when's he not going to have pencil and paper in anything he's dealing with in mysticism? If he goes out to deal with a demonic possession, I'm betting you he's bringing not only a pencil and paper, but some pre-drawn sigils with him. So that's a good example there of how you have these two separate mentalities, but that understand and agree that you should have some core something. At least I believe he would agree with it. I haven't actually asked him for that. And I'm not naming names because everyone will know him who's in there, and anyone who doesn't will show up there eventually and find him. But without permission, I don't name names. But yeah, core methods like that, even when you're coming from polar opposite methodologies, you still hang on to those core methods because it gives you a fallback in an emergency. The last thing I suggest, advance your art form. Seriously. If you're eclectic, seek some grounding. I was severely eclectic, and I sought my grounding in methods that I could go back to time and again. So I found a mantra that is Norse and started making use of that. I made use of that with my mala here, my Norse mala. In order to advance myself beyond the eclectic, personally, I rooted myself more in the Norse traditions, but also more in my raw energy work. So I'm kind of rooted in two places. If you're traditional, and you have one system, and there's one system and one system only, and it goes by the name of whatever it is, I highly recommend you seek outside methods. That you try things outside of that system. See what they do for you. See what they don't do for you. Hey, you might find that by adding a little bit into it, your ability to manifest multiplies 1,000 times in a clap of a hand. Or maybe it doesn't. But you won't advance your method without looking outside of just where you're at. You just don't. It's kind of like martial arts, okay? You can be the world's greatest boxer of all time, but you're going to get thrown eventually by someone who's the world's greatest thrower if you don't study throws. Doesn't matter if you use them or not. You need to understand why they do what they do. And in that, your boxing will become better. So, I really feel that if you're too eclectic, you do need to ground a bit. But if you're too traditional, too singular system, you need to expand. And that's my advice. That's advance your art form. Go in that other direction and find out what you're missing. That kind of sums up what I got planned. Show went a little longer than I thought it would. That's okay, because I think we had a good time here. I know I had a lot of fun. Hoping you had a lot of fun and enjoyed this. Please, if you enjoyed it, leave a comment. Like, share, subscribe. Make this thing plaster all of Facebook and all of YouTube. Be my greatest wish to see this video everywhere. Actually, no, my greatest wish would be see you grow as a mystic. My greatest wish be to see the world embrace and understand mysticism to a new degree, to see us put aside the old chains that have held us as mystics, and to grow into a new form of understanding that goes beyond anything, where we understand the core of the mysteries of the universe. That'd be my greatest hope. Well, that'd be my second greatest hope then, so I guess the other one's my third, because my greatest hope for you would be that you awaken the night within.